What if depression is not your enemy? What if the darkness that has been consuming you, the heaviness that makes every day feel impossible, the emptiness that no medication fully removes, what if all of that is not a malfunction of your brain, but a message from the deepest part of yourself, a message you've been refusing to hear? Carl Jung, one of the most profound psychologists in human history, believed exactly this. He believed that depression is the soul's way of forcing you to stop, to descend, to finally face the parts of yourself you've been running from your entire life. And he believed that inside that darkness, if you have the courage to enter it fully, lies everything you've been searching for. I know this sounds impossible when you're in the middle of it, when getting out of bed feels like climbing a mountain, when joy seems like something that happens to other people, when you wonder if you'll ever feel normal again. But stay with me for the next 20 minutes. Because what Carl Jung discovered about depression, about the psyche, about the journey through darkness, might not just explain what you're going through. It might show you that your depression is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a transformation that could make you more whole, more alive, more authentically yourself than you've ever been. This is not motivational nonsense. This is not just think positive. This is a map of the underworld from a man who went there himself and came back with treasures. Let's begin. Before we go deeper, I need to ask you something. If you're watching this video, I suspect you know what depression feels like. The weight, the grayness, the feeling that something is fundamentally wrong but you can't name it. Have you ever wondered if your depression is trying to tell you something? Leave a comment, because you're not alone, and what we're about to explore might change how you understand your own darkness. Carl Gustav Jung was born in 1875 in Switzerland. From the beginning, his life was marked by darkness. His mother suffered from depression and spent periods in a psychiatric hospital when Carl was young. His father was a pastor who had lost his faith but continued preaching anyway, living a life of spiritual emptiness that young Carl could sense but not understand. As a child, Jung had vivid, terrifying dreams. He felt split between two personalities. One was the ordinary schoolboy, the other was a timeless old man who knew secrets about the universe. He spent hours alone, creating rituals, carving figures, sinking into an inner world that felt more real than the outer one. Most children who experience this are told something is wrong with them. Jung came to believe that his inner experiences, as strange and dark as they were, contained profound truths that the outer world ignored. This conviction would define his life's work. Jung became a psychiatrist, and for a time was Sigmund Freud's chosen heir. But they had a fundamental disagreement. Freud believed that the unconscious was primarily a repository of repressed desires, mainly sexual. Jung believed the unconscious was vast, creative, and purposeful. It wasn't just a garbage dump of rejected wishes. It was a living entity with its own intelligence, constantly trying to communicate with consciousness. When Jung broke with Freud in 1913, he fell into what he would later call his confrontation with the unconscious. For 6 years, Jung experienced visions, heard voices, felt himself descending into darkness. He induced waking dreams and recorded them. He painted his experiences. He talked with figures who appeared from the depths of his psyche. By any clinical standard, Jung was having a breakdown. He later admitted that he came close to psychosis. But he didn't resist it. He descended into it willingly, treating his own darkness as a journey rather than a disease. And what he found there became the foundation of everything he taught about depression, about the psyche, about what it means to become whole. Jung's central insight about depression is revolutionary. Depression is not simply a malfunction to be fixed. It is a purposeful event in the psyche. Something wants to happen. The soul is demanding attention, and since you won't give it willingly, it takes it by force. Think about what depression does. It stops you. It removes your energy for the life you were living. It pulls you away from the world and forces you inward. It makes everything you used to enjoy feel meaningless. From the perspective of modern psychiatry, these are just symptoms to eliminate. From Jung's perspective, these symptoms are communications. The psyche is saying, the life you were living is not working. The person you were pretending to be is not who you really are. Something needs to change at the deepest level, and I will not let you continue until you face it. Let me ask you directly. Before your depression began or before it got worse, were you living authentically? Were you pursuing what truly mattered to you or what you thought you should pursue? Were you being who you really are or who others expected you to be? Were you facing difficult truths about yourself and your life, or were you avoiding them? Depression, Jung would say, often comes when we've strayed too far from our true path. When the gap between who we are and who we're pretending to be becomes unbearable, when we've built a life that looks right on the outside, but feels wrong on the inside, the psyche won't tolerate this indefinitely. Eventually, it pulls the plug. If this is resonating with you, if you're starting to see your depression in a new light, I need you to do something now. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. Not for me, but because this perspective could help others who are suffering. And what comes next is where Jung's ideas become truly transformative. Jung described depression as a descent into the unconscious. This sounds abstract, but think of it concretely. When you're depressed, where does your attention go? It goes inward. You lose interest in the outer world and become trapped in inner experience. You ruminate, you remember, you feel things you've been avoiding. Jung called this a night sea journey, after the mythological image of the sun traveling through the underworld at night before rising again. The hero in many myths must descend into darkness, into the belly of the whale, into the underworld, before being reborn. This is not just storytelling, it's a psychological reality. Depression takes you down. The question is, will you resist the descent and stay stuck, or will you consciously enter the darkness and find what's waiting there? What's waiting there, according to Jung, is the shadow. The shadow is everything about yourself that you've rejected, denied, hidden, and repressed. Not just negative things, though those are there too. The shadow also contains your unlived life, the talents you never developed, the desires you never acknowledged, the parts of yourself that didn't fit the image you were trying to maintain. Growing up, we all learn to be acceptable. We learn what parts of ourselves get approval and what parts get rejected. We build a persona, a mask, an acceptable self to show the world, and everything that doesn't fit the persona gets pushed into the shadow. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It lives in the unconscious, growing stronger, waiting, and eventually it demands recognition. One way it demands recognition is through depression. Think about it this way. Depression often brings up feelings of worthlessness, of not being good enough, of fundamental shame. These are shadow feelings. They're not the truth about you, but they are truths you've been carrying unconsciously. Until you face them, acknowledge them, and integrate them, they will continue to pull you down. Depression also often brings up anger, rage at circumstances, at people, at life. For many people, especially those raised to be nice, to not make waves, to always accommodate others, anger is deeply in the shadow. They've never allowed themselves to feel it, let alone express it. So it turns inward. It becomes depression. Jung famously said that depression is anger turned inward. But more broadly, depression is the shadow demanding attention, and the only way out is through. Second question for you. What parts of yourself have you been hiding? What desires have you told yourself you shouldn't have? What anger have you been suppressing? What talents have you abandoned because they didn't fit the life you thought you were supposed to live? Your depression might be pointing directly at these things, not as punishment but as invitation. The psyche wants to be whole. It wants all of you, not just the acceptable parts. Jung developed a process called individuation, the journey toward becoming a complete, integrated self. This doesn't mean becoming perfect. It means becoming whole. It means acknowledging and integrating all parts of yourself, including the shadow. Depression, in Jung's view, is often an invitation to individuation. The old self, the limited self, the persona self, must die for the larger self to emerge. This death feels like depression. The ego experiences it as destruction, annihilation, the end. But it's really transformation. This is why Jung was cautious about simply medicating depression away. He didn't oppose medication entirely. He was a doctor and understood its place, but he worried that numbing symptoms could prevent the transformation that depression was trying to initiate. The pain has a purpose. The darkness has something to show you. But how do you actually navigate this? How do you enter the darkness consciously instead of just being swallowed by it? Jung recommended several practices. First, active imagination. This is a technique where you consciously engage with the contents of your unconscious. You take a dream image, a persistent mood, a figure from your imagination, and you dialogue with it. You ask it questions. You let it speak. You write down or draw what emerges. This might sound strange, but Jung found it extraordinarily effective. When you engage with your unconscious as a partner rather than an enemy, when you treat your depression not as a disease, but as a guide with something to teach, the relationship changes. You're no longer the victim. You're the explorer. Second, dream work. Dreams, Jung believed, are messages from the unconscious. They use symbolic language because the unconscious doesn't think in words, it thinks in images. Learning to work with your dreams, recording them, sitting with their images, asking what they might mean is one of the most direct ways to understand what your psyche is trying to tell you. If you're depressed, your dreams may be especially significant. They may be showing you exactly what needs to be faced. Third, creative expression. Jung himself painted, sculpted, and wrote during his confrontation with the unconscious. Creative expression allows unconscious contents to emerge without having to be fully understood. You paint your mood. You write from the darkness. You let something emerge that you don't control. This is not art therapy in a superficial sense. This is allowing the unconscious to speak through your hands, to give form to what has no words yet. But perhaps the most important thing Jung taught about depression is this: don't rush through it. We live in a culture that wants quick fixes. Feel bad, take a pill, feel better. But depression that is merely suppressed often returns, sometimes stronger, sometimes in different forms. The psyche is patient. It will wait, but it will not be ignored forever. Jung advocated for what he called sitting in the darkness, not wallowing, not indulging, but consciously being present with your depression, asking what it wants, listening for its message. This takes tremendous courage. Every instinct screams to escape, to distract, to numb. But the way out is through. I want to share something Jung wrote about his own experience during his confrontation with the unconscious. I let myself drop. Suddenly, it was as though the ground literally gave way beneath my feet, and I plunged down into dark depths. He went on. I was living in a constant state of tension. Often I felt as if gigantic blocks of stone were tumbling down upon me. One thunderstorm followed another. This is not a description of wellness. This is a description of psychological crisis, and yet Jung later described these years as the most important time of my life. Everything else is to be derived from this. The darkness was terrible, but it was also the source of everything he became. Let me address something important. I am not saying that medication is wrong, that therapy is unnecessary, or that you should suffer without help. Clinical depression is real. Neurochemistry matters. Some people need medication to function, to stay alive, to have the stability to do the psychological work. What I am saying is that medication and conventional therapy, while often necessary, may not be sufficient. They can stabilize you, but stabilization is not transformation. They can lift you out of the depths, but they may not help you understand why you descended in the first place. Jung's approach complements modern treatment. It asks you to take your depression seriously as a meaningful event, not just a random malfunction. It asks you to be curious about your suffering, not just desperate to escape it. It asks you to see yourself as a soul on a journey, not just a brain with a chemical imbalance. Third question, and this one requires courage. If your depression could speak, what would it say? What would it tell you about your life, your choices, your unlived potential? What is it asking you to face that you've been avoiding? Write your answer in the comments, or write it privately for yourself, but write it, because putting words to the darkness begins to transform it. Before we approach the end, I want to tell you about Jung's concept of the self, with a capital S. The self is not the ego. The ego is the center of conscious awareness, the I you think you are. The self is the center of the entire psyche, conscious and unconscious together. It is who you truly are at the deepest level. The self often appears in dreams and visions as a symbol of wholeness, a mandala, a divine figure, a wise old man or woman, a circle, a fourfold structure. It represents the potential for integration, for becoming complete. Depression, in Jung's view, is often the ego's experience of being confronted by the self. The ego feels small, worthless, insignificant, because compared to the self, it is. The ego is just a small island of consciousness in the vast ocean of the psyche. When the self makes its presence felt, the ego can feel annihilated. But this annihilation is not destruction, it's relativization. The ego is learning that it is not the center of the psyche. Something larger is. And submitting to that larger something, integrating with it, is the path to wholeness. This is why many people who go through deep depression and come out the other side report feeling transformed. Not just recovered, but fundamentally changed. They've died and been reborn psychologically. The old self that was depressed is gone. A new self has emerged, larger, wiser, more connected to the depths. This doesn't mean depression is good. It doesn't mean suffering is desirable. But it does mean that suffering can be meaningful. that depression can be a doorway rather than just a pit, that the darkness, terrible as it is, can be the womb of a new life. So what do you do with all this? Let me offer some concrete guidance drawn from Jung's approach. First, take your depression seriously as a communication from your psyche. Stop treating it only as a problem to be solved or a disease to be cured. Ask yourself what it might be trying to tell you. What is it stopping you from? What is it drawing your attention toward? Second, examine your life honestly. Have you been living authentically? Have you been true to yourself? Or have you been living according to others' expectations, playing a role, wearing a mask? Depression often marks the moment when the mask can no longer be maintained. Third, explore your shadow. What have you rejected about yourself? What desires have you denied? What anger have you suppressed? What parts of you did you lock away to be acceptable? These rejected parts are calling out. They want to be reclaimed. Fourth, work with your dreams. Start recording them. Sit with their images. Let them speak to you. Your unconscious is always trying to communicate. Dreams are one of its primary languages. Fifth, create something. Write, paint, draw, sculpt, play music. Let something emerge that you don't control. Give the unconscious a channel to express itself. Sixth, find a guide. Jung believed strongly in the value of a skilled therapist who understands the depths, who can serve as a companion in the underworld. This is not weakness. Dante had Virgil. Heroes in myths have mentors. The descent is dangerous, and a guide can make the difference between transformation and destruction. Seventh, be patient. Individuation is not quick. The journey through depression to wholeness takes as long as it takes. Our culture wants instant results, but the psyche operates on its own timeline. Trust the process, even when it feels endless. Before you go, I need you to do something. If this video has given you a new way of seeing your darkness, share it with someone who is struggling, someone who feels lost, someone who needs to know that their depression might be a doorway, not just a prison. And subscribe to this channel. We're exploring the ideas that can help us understand our deepest struggles and find our way through them. Carl Jung spent his entire career exploring the darkness of the human psyche. He went places that most people are terrified to go. And he came back with a message that I believe is desperately needed today. Your darkness is not just disease, it is also communication. Your depression is not just malfunction, it is also invitation. Your suffering is not meaningless. It is trying to tell you something. This does not mean you should suffer without help. Get help. Take medication if you need it. See a therapist. Do whatever you need to do to survive. But also, listen to your darkness. Ask what it wants. Find out what parts of yourself are calling to be recognized. Discover who you might become on the other side of this descent. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Your depression is an opportunity to make the darkness conscious, to face what you've been avoiding, to integrate what you've rejected, to become who you truly are. It doesn't feel like an opportunity. It feels like hell, I know. But hell, traversed consciously, can become the path to a life you never imagined possible. In the darkest myths, the hero must descend to the underworld before being reborn. Inanna descends to the realm of death. Orpheus descends to bring back Eurydice. Christ descends to harrow hell before resurrection. These are not just stories, they are maps of psychological reality. The descent is real, the darkness is real, but so is the return, so is the transformation, so is the possibility of emerging more whole, more alive, more yourself than ever before. You are in the underworld now. It's terrifying, it's painful, it feels like it will never end, but it is not the end. It is the beginning of something you cannot yet imagine. Trust the process. Enter the darkness consciously. Find what's waiting there for you and come back bearing gifts. The world needs what you'll find.